This is the start of a series on how to build an XRPL validator. So I'm calling this the Sugar XRPL Validator Series, Demystifying XRPL Validation. And the overall goal of this series is to educate you on how to build an XRPL validator. The reasoning for that is because we want the network to be more decentralized. And the more people that are running validators, the more decentralized it becomes. And so it's just overall a good thing. There's really no monetary incentive to run a validator other than if you do have a business, I would recommend you running a validator because that adds to the overall health of the network. But besides that, it's really just an overall good for the entire community, for the entire network. And so that's why I'm doing this. And that's why I started running a validator all the way back in January of this year. In fact, if you come over here to XRP Scan and you were to do a search for the validator and do a search for my validator, put in the word sugar, you will be able to go and see my validator and be able to see my uptime over the last several months, year to date. And you'll be able to look down here and see how many ledgers I missed on a daily basis. And yeah, go from there. We've had a lot missed recently, and actually this is network wide because of some issues with people not updating to 2.5.0, the Rippled, most recent version of Rippled, which we'll talk about in future videos. So I just want to give a shout out to Lady K. She's another community member who decided to spin up an XRPL validator at about the same time I did. And she gave me some great tips and head start on the hardware. In fact, the hardware I'll be sharing with you is very similar to hers, if not exactly like hers. I'm not sure if she's running a RAID 1 config, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But for the most part, I think all of our hardware is the same, and she is another great community validator. On the XRPL, you have 35 what they call DUNL validators. Kind of a unified node list. And these are the ones that are giving consensus to transactions on a primary level. Of course, there's many other validators as well in the event that any of those validators fail or there's other needs there on the network. And so there's about 184 validators that are currently running. And you can see the number that is currently updated to the most recent software. And of course, part of being a good validator is when a new version of the software comes out, you want to try to get that updated. So, we have several people who have still not updated, and this is almost a month after the update came out. So we're currently trying to spread the word, for these down here with 2.4. We want to try to get them updated as soon as possible. All right, so coming back to the overall direction here with the video. This first video, part one, is going to tackle the hardware itself and why I believe this hardware shines. And to start that, what you'll want to do is go to xrpl.org and look at the system requirements that are required to run a Rippled validator. And if you'll come down here, it'll give you a list of recommended specifications. These would be what I would call minimum recommended specifications. And so these were the specifications that drove myself and Lady K both, Kristen, to go the route that we did with our hardware. And as you're about to see, our hardware that we chose to build with back in January far exceeds the minimum recommended specifications. And we'll also talk about networking as well. So just a series of thoughts there as we get started. So the first piece in the hardware that we chose to use was the MinisForum MS-01 Mini PC Barebone Kit with an Intel Core i9 12900H processor. This does have some Pro Enterprise networking support as well. That's really even better than a data center would be. And it has the ability to put as much as 96 gigs of RAM in this specific model. Notice that on Amazon, when you go to purchase these items, there's several different kits. Some of these kits you can buy with RAM already installed. You can buy with a hard drive already installed. I just chose to go the bare bones route without any RAM or any SSD drives installed. So the price on that for just the motherboard itself with the processor pre-installed with this case is going to run you $495. You can come through here and see some of the specs on this bare bones kit, some of the cooling involved there. And yeah, it'll give some of the other details as to why we went this route. It's a very small size. This fits right in my living room entertainment center and sits there, has been running flawlessly for the last almost 6 months, a little bit over 6 months actually. So that's the kind of the starting point. This is the piece from which you're going to build the rest. And so then secondly, we both purchased and decided to go with crucial 96 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM running at 5600 megahertz or 5200. I believe currently the motherboard, I have it set up where it's running at 5200, not the full 56. Just some reasonings there that I can get into later on why I did that. But yeah, this works with the 13th gen Intel Core processor that I'm running. And this is totally overkill. You can get by with 64 gigs, but I just chose to go with the 96, and I know Lady K did the same thing to make sure that we have quite a bit of growth room overhead. 64 gigs is needed here, and I continue to keep an eye on this. On the most busiest of days, I might use 50 gigs of RAM, depending on the transactions that are being dealt with on the ledger. So that gives you an idea on RAM, and yeah, that and make sure when you're purchasing this that you purchase the exact kind that you need. This is a laptop memory kit. That's the only kind of memory that will go in these mini PCs, so you have to go with the laptop version of the memory. So just make sure that that's what you're getting. And what I'll do is in the YouTube description, I'll make sure to include links to these links to these Amazon pages so that you can purchase these items. Unless something changes, these things should be available for the next several months. I would imagine at some point these things will go outdated and there will be a new version of the same thing or very similar. So I'll try to update that as we go along. So that's the bare bones kit. There's the RAM kit that you would purchase for $193. And then this, in my opinion, is the key to the entire setup. And that is you want to make sure that you go with the Samsung 990 Pro SSD NVMe M.2 drives. These have incredible throughput. Basically, just to boil it down, these give you 140 times more speed capability than what is recommended. 10,000 IOPS sustained. The Samsung drives will give you 1,400,000 IOPS. So it's 140x more powerful than what is recommended or required. And yeah, very, very, very performant these drives are. So I bought two of these. I bought two, I believe, two 2 terabyte sticks. And then I'm running them in a RAID 1 configuration. And basically what that means is that rather than having 4 terabytes of usable space, I only have about 1.9, 1.8-ish terabytes, with the other drive being a mirror of the current drive. So in the event that one of the drives fails, within a matter of a few minutes, I can spin up a new drive. I can put a new drive in. In fact, I just bought some more of these drives to have on hand in case, in the unlikely event, don't think it's very likely, but in the unlikely event that we were to have a drive failure, I can just swap one of those out and be right up and running within a matter of minutes. So I'm running two of these 2 terabyte Samsung 990 Pros in a RAID 1 configuration. So really, outside of those three pieces, your bare bones PC, Intel Core i9, your 96 gigs of DDR5 5600 megahertz RAM, and your two 2 terabyte Samsung 990 Pro SSDs. Outside of that, the only other piece that you would have would be to consider power backup, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what I would just want to do is to show you the cost on this. So take $159. Right now these drives are on sale, and I would imagine they would continue to come down in price. So $159 times 2 plus about $500 for the bare bones PC, plus your RAM, puts you at a total build cost of about $1,020. That's before tax and shipping. So you're probably looking at around $1,100 to $1,200 when it's all said and done. You might need to buy you a thumb drive, which we'll talk about on the next video when you're installing Linux. You're going to be running Ubuntu Linux on this. There are several other flavors you can run, but I chose to run Ubuntu Linux, and we'll talk about the reasonings for that in future videos. So with these three components, with these three basic components, you have a system that is ready to be a rippled validator. The other piece of equipment that I would encourage you to buy, if you want to make sure that you have availability, and what availability is it just basically means that your system is always running, always validating. There's a ledger that's always closing or seeking to be closed every 3 seconds. And so you want to have a system that is as performant and as available as possible. And so in order to do that, you want to have some kind of power backup system. And so I chose to go with this UPS powered backup, Bluetti Solar Generator Elite 200 version 2 with over a 2,000 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery backup. And the reasoning for that is just 17-year lifespan, assuming that it was drained every day. And it's not going to be drained every day. There's basically I'm using this as a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply backup. It offers 15 millisecond switching over when the power goes off. And so I could literally run my entire validator setup that I have off of this battery backup for over 30 hours. And what's awesome about this battery backup is you can plug in up to 1,000 watts of solar power so that during the day, even on a cloudy day, you can replenish this battery backup. So in the event of an apocalypse where the entire electric grid goes down, I've got a way to keep on running my XRPL validator. And as you can see, this UPS power backup cost more than the entire validator did, with it only running about $1,100 to $1,200. So, all in all, I have about, what would that be? Almost $3,000 invested in this. And really, that's not a lot of money when you think about what you're able to do, the kind of value that you're able to provide for the network. And again, I'm not even on the UNL. I know there's a lot of XRPL elitist snobs that would say, running a validator from your home is kind of hokey, it's backwards. Well, all I would say to that is look at the data, look at the evidence. My validator has outperformed several over the last 6 months that are on the current UNL list. So, just look at some of these and compare their uptime versus my uptime over the last 6 months, and you'll see that saying that you have to be in a data center where you're paying $300 to $500 a month is just actually silly when you have access to 1 gigabyte asymmetric fiber connections that are giving you less than 10 millisecond ping time to some of the major servers around the world. So the reality is you can run an XRPL validator from your home as long as you have consistent I would recommend 1 gigabit per second fiber internet connection. Perform a ping test regularly to see how your latency is, because really latency and hard drive speed is going to be the keys to your system performing well and to being able to offer that consistent uptime. So that's just a quick view of the hardware and why I chose to go that route. If you compare the math on this bare bones kit with the RAM, with the hard drive, and with the UPS backup, compare that to the recommended specifications, no wonder my system running from home on my 1 gig fiber connection is outperforming several of the current UNL validators that are running in a data center. So yeah, are there risks to running it from home? Sure. Could we have a tornado come through and wipe out my system? Yes. Could the power grid go down for a few days and us not have power? Yes. But I believe, as far as I can tell, I have a system that is strong, that is sustained, and I think what it does is it just challenges the myths. there's been this gatekeeping mentality that, this hardware isn't enterprise grade enough. I don't know how more enterprise grade you can get than something that is recommended for a heavy duty workstation, offering 140x the capability of what's required. I don't know how you get more performant RAM than that. Maybe the argument could be made now, 6 months later, you could get a more performant server, but why do you need it? When really, I would argue the bottleneck is the software itself, the rippled software. And, we can talk about that in another video. But yeah, I just want to kind of put this out here because you can run a decentralized system on a 1 gig asymmetric fiber connection with very low latency from your home, not a problem. And really, in my opinion, that leads to the argument of greater decentralization. So yeah, this is a tiny powerhouse that packs a lot of power. It provides an abundance of processing power, easily handling all validator tasks, even under peak network loads. I've been watching my loads over the last several months, and I've had zero peer disconnects because of my hardware. So that's very important to keep in mind. And of course, again, the speed demon in all of this is those SSD NVMe hard drives. Those are things you definitely want to get. Helps the latency and make sure that you're running at near instantaneous disk access. And then, of course, the fiber connection. So that all coupled together leads to a great system. So if anyone tries to tell you that independent high performance validators can't exist outside of the traditional data centers, just politely tell them to go check the data. My validator, Sugar, is living proof. And in the next video, we're going to dive into what makes this setup truly resilient. I've already talked about my uninterruptible power supply, but we'll mention that again and then get into the building of the actual system with the installation of Linux and Rippled. So we'll talk soon. Thanks.